Before we dive into today's episode, I want to say a big thank you to our sponsor, PensionBee. They're a leading online pension provider, making it easier for people, especially single parents like us, to feel confident about saving for retirement. Along with their easy-to-use app, their podcast can also help you build confidence with your personal finances. The Pension Confident podcast is a monthly show covering pensions, ISAs, mortgages, and more. Listen to the Pension Confident podcast wherever you get your podcasts. You can find it on YouTube and in the PensionBee app too. Just remember, as with all investments, your capital is at risk. Thanks again to PensionBee for supporting this episode. Hi, I'm Zoë Desmond, the founder of Frollo, the award-winning app for single parents that features both community and dating modes. And I'm also co-author, along with my wonderful friend Rebecca Cox, that I made through Frollo, of the book How to Be a Happy Single Parent. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Frollo podcast. Today's episode is with Caro Giles, a single mom of 4, writer, educator, and advocate for families who don't fit into the system. Caro's new memoir, Unschooled, The Story of a Family That Doesn't Fit In, is powerful and deeply personal. It explores the decision she made to homeschool 3 of her daughters, not as a lifestyle choice, but as an act of survival and love in response to a school system that simply wasn't made for them. Caro, thank you so much for agreeing to speak with me on the Frollo podcast. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
It would be great to start with you giving our listeners a sense of who you are and a bit of background to your world.
Yeah, so I'm a single mum with 4 daughters, and I've been parenting mainly on my own since 2018. So since my youngest one was about 2 or 3. So it's been a wild ride because I didn't go into parenting thinking I'd be doing it mostly on my own. And I didn't go into parenting knowing that some of my children would have complex needs, which would mean they couldn't access the school system. So for most of my kids' lives, I was living in Northumberland, which was wild and beautiful and gave us lots of opportunities to be outside and learn amongst nature. But also, I guess it was quite isolating for me. As a single person living in quite a rural community. And once some of my children were not able to access school, it meant I also was not part of that school community. And so I found that I didn't really have much of a village around me. And during lockdown, I did a master's in creative writing and wrote my first memoir called 12 Moons, which was about my life raising 4 wild girls in Northumberland. And then my next book, which is coming out any day now, is called Unschooled, and that's about the life I've had with the girls trying to fight inside broken systems, mental health systems and education systems, in order to get funded education, especially for 2 of my daughters who definitely can't learn inside the classroom. And so I see my writing as a form of activism, really trying to give voice to other families a bit like mine who sit outside the norm, who can't exist comfortably inside the status quo. But also, I guess I became a writer partly because I'm unable to go out to work easily because I'm a full-time carer to the girls who can't go to school. And I guess my situation is heightened by the fact that I'm usually a solo parent. So there's no one else bringing an income into the house, and there's no one else to share the load with. So it's been a very extreme and very challenging few years. But the memoir, I hope, demonstrates how fierce we've been in the face of adversity and how we've managed to forge a life that works for us, despite lots of people telling us that we should be doing it differently.
Oh, well, I have to say, even just, reading about you in the lead up to recording this episode, and was sent your book. So thank you so much for that as well. But yeah, incredibly moved by your story and what you're doing. I mean, it's really incredible. But just so with your daughters, so when did homeschooling come into play, and what were the reasons behind the specific reasons? What were the, how did that come about? And was it the same reason for your three daughters who are being homeschooled, or was it a variety of individual circumstances?
Okay. So when I had my first daughter, she's now 18, I assumed she just would go to school like I went to school. And she didn't just go to school. She found it very hard to go into school. And although she was very academically able, she became very, very, very anxious. So she found it hard to leave me in the morning. She became very anxious in the evening and very quickly became very miserable. And I didn't really recognize her. And when I spoke to the school about it, they would always tell me that she was fine when she was in school. And I know to other parents whose kids struggle with school, that will be a similar story. Parents are told they're fine when you're not here. And that kind of dismissal of our innate kind of intuition about our kids is something that I've experienced again and again, and something I write about. So she managed a couple of years in school. And then I went to a parents' evening and they said, yeah, your child doesn't speak at school. And I just didn't recognize that version of my daughter. She was really lively and curious and chatty at home. And so at that point, I had lots of other tiny babies as well, because obviously I've got 4 kids. And it seemed to be a good idea and a bit of a lifestyle choice to educate them all together at home whilst I was doing some freelance work. We were living somewhere where we had a tiny mortgage. I could afford to work part-time, and we had a lovely time together for a few years. And then when my marriage ended, I needed to work more. I needed the children to be in school. I needed more support around me. And at that point, I couldn't get my oldest daughter to go into school. She was completely traumatized within the system, had a mental health crisis. And eventually, after years of very difficult appointments and battling with the health system, I got a diagnosis of autism for her. And then a very similar sort of thing happened with my third daughter, who began to find it very difficult to go into school, very distressed. Eventually, she stopped being able to speak at all. And again, I had hundreds and hundreds of appointments, lots of people telling me that I needed to discipline her more, that she was fine when I wasn't there, that I was the problem. And eventually I got a diagnosis of autism for her as well. And so both of those 2 girls were forced to become very ill, really, before anybody believed that they could not manage inside the school system. And so I would really hope that this book might contribute towards a conversation that would prevent that from happening to other families. My other 2 daughters actually do go to school, although one of them did some flexi schooling for a time. She just went to school 3 days a week because I think she was probably really impacted by everything that had happened to her sisters and wanted to be near her mum, actually. But now 2 of my daughters go to school very happily, but the other 2 are unable to learn at school. And I've gone through a long process of going to tribunals with the local authority to try and secure funding to help them learn at home, with varying degrees of success. But ultimately, they need to be at home and learn in their own way in order to thrive. And that's what I've been fighting for however many years it is now.
And how is that? How is the home learning for them? Is that working? Is that working for them?
Yeah. So essentially, it's been a process of recovery for both of those girls. So in order for them to be able to access any kind of learning, they've needed to recover from the trauma that they experienced in school, and also the trauma of not having their medical needs met within a mental health system that doesn't understand always autistic girls. So really, sometimes learning at home for them has just looked like a place where they can be themselves and explore their own interests and recover. But now my oldest daughter is very successfully learning online, going out and working in part-time jobs, having a social circle, really thriving. And my 13-year-old, Emmy, she is still recovering, but she's writing a book. She loves Greek mythology. She loves Greek mythology. She wants to do a project about trees this term with me. She loves to swim. She loves to go on her roller skates. So In my house, success looks like something quite different. For those girls, they will not sit down and do a maths paper or even possibly do any exams, but they will learn to be able to communicate their needs. They will be able to follow their passions. They will be able to understand what it means to have a healthy mindset. And for my kids, that's huge, because for a long time, that's not what they've had access to or been able to experience.
Oh, I think every kid should have access to that. And just to give a little kind of a little window into my own school experience, and partly the reason why I feel really moved about what you're doing is, I had a really negative experience in school myself, in secondary school. And I was only just recently diagnosed with ADHD in the last 6 months. And it made me quite emotional, because it made me realize how much I lost out on in my education, basically, and in so many different aspects. So understanding myself, or other people understanding me. But really, I carried huge shame around school, my school years. And I felt like I just couldn't fit in. I didn't understand why I couldn't I didn't understand why I was struggling so much more than the people around me. And so I just felt like a failure. So then I kind of gave up, and, I was sort of, I was the class clown. I was positioned as the class clown by the teachers, or just giving up. So then I really got to a point where I didn't bother going to school, actually, in sort of when I was 16, 17, there was a lot of bunking off. Got to a point where it was like, I'm so behind now that, like, how do I even catch up? And so it's such a vicious spiral, and it's so damaging. And it's taken me, I think I'm still recovering from that period of my life, and trying to kind of speak compassionately to myself that, it wasn't that I was just an absolute waste of space, that, it was that I was just unsupported, in the system and the work, so yeah. And speaking to other, especially Frollo single parents, I know that there's a lot of single parents who have neurodiverse kids in the Frollo community. And I'm hearing about some of the Frollo community who have kids who have kids are going through the GCSEs, and, really, really struggling and dropping out of school. And it's so upsetting. It does feel like the whole system just needs a massive shakeup.
And I think, and I'm sorry that was your school experience as well, but I think you are so far from alone. I hear from so many adults who say that was their experience too. And one of the reasons I wanted to write this book was to ensure that people started to understand the importance of having a voice and the importance of being heard. And partly that was for my daughter, Emmy, who has a diagnosis of mutism. So she literally can't always use her voice. And I wanted to give her a voice, but also, particularly as a single parent, I found that I was vilified and not believed in ways that other parents perhaps don't experience. Certainly, male parents don't always experience it. But because I was a woman on her own, and because I was so stretched to breaking point with 4 children to care for on my own, and because I was always fighting, and because I was required to advocate and speak out so often, and sometimes my anger would look like tears or would look like anxiety, I wouldn't be believed and my voice would be dismissed. And so really Unschooled is also for all of those other parents, particularly single parents, who have not felt that they've been heard and do not feel that they've been supported, because that was as damaging really as the failure of the systems to support my kids, And I think that's a common story for for lots of women I know, but especially for parents who are doing it on their own and who don't have a supportive partner to attend meetings with them, or whatever. I mean, my experience of co-parenting has been very challenging, very adversarial, very unhelpful, and so that was even worse in a way than just doing it completely on my own.
Of course. I completely, understand that. And I think it's an important point to raise about highlighting that stigma, because it is there. And I think a lot of, what single parents go through, whether it's, advocating for your kid in the way that you are, or various other things we do as single parents, unfortunately, I think there's this voice in our heads that kind of, well, not voice in our heads. I think there's a reality that, the fear of being judged or being put into pigeonholed because we're single parents. So that's why
being
X, Y, and
blamed
Z
for it
might be happening, or that we're overreacting, or that there's, just something a bit off kilter about the situation. So it's being positioned as this way. So yeah, I think it's really important to highlight that, because I think a lot of people listening to this episode, whatever their own experience is, will have some form of understanding with that. The following is a paid advertisement from BetterHelp. I want to talk about mental health for a minute. Being a single parent comes with its highs and lows, and as single parents, it's so important to make sure we look after ourselves in the process. That's why I'm excited to introduce you to BetterHelp, the online therapy service that's here to support you every step of the way. With BetterHelp, you can connect with registered therapists from the comfort of your own home. Whether you're feeling overwhelmed, stressed, or just need someone to talk to, they're here to help. Plus, as a Frollo member, you get an exclusive 25% off your first month. Just visit betterhelp.com/Frollo. That's betterhelp.com/Frollo.
And as much as Unschooled is a book about education, it's also really a book about identity and trying to hold on to your own identity beyond parenting, and for me, being a carer as well, beyond caring, because there's a love story that's woven through the book that was unexpected for me when I started writing it, but delightful. But I use that to kind of explore clinging on to myself and trying to rediscover myself as a woman beyond the mothering and the parenting. And I think that is something that lots of your listeners might resonate with as well, because when you're a single parent, it's so hard, isn't it, to meet your own need. And because I was educating and working and caring and all of that stuff, it felt impossible that I would ever be able to rediscover what my own needs were amongst that. And so I've tried hard to unpick that a little bit in the writing of this book as well. And I hope that would give hope to any listeners that you have who are kind of right in the thick of it at the minute and feel like they'll never kind of find themselves again after, the end of a relationship or after years of parenting on their own, because somehow amongst all of it, it is possible to still find ways to thrive, even though it's very, very difficult.
Absolutely. And I absolutely love how you positioned that as a love story and rediscovering yourself. And I identify with that in my own personal way. And I, through ways that I've had to advocate for my son and our situation. And I realize that I'm not only advocating for him, I'm advocating for myself. And I suppose truth and authenticity and being seen and being accepted and having my own back and having his back. And that's actually, there is beauty in that for sure. So thank you for highlighting that. And I'd love to dig into that a bit more, because you are pretty much solo mom of 4 kids. You are advocating. You've got 2 that are being, homeschooling. You're a writer. I feel really overwhelmed when I imagine everything you have on your plate. So how is it that you keep all the balls in the air, and how do you look after yourself?
Well, I definitely don't keep all the balls in the air. I think so. For a start, I guess my writing, although it is my job, it's also that has also been a way to rediscover who I am and what I'm capable of. So that's a really important part of my life, and I guess I fight very hard for the time to do that. And I've also become quite good at finding tiny snippets of time in which to work. So because I have some of the kids at home all of the time, and often I can't leave the house. Like when I wrote my first book, I just got up really early in the morning and would write and light a candle and just write for an hour. And I kept doing that every day until I'd written the 80,000 words that was the book. This one was much harder because I was going through a tribunal for Emmy. She was really poorly as well. Plus, there were various other tricky things happening in my life. And so writing Unschooled was really an act of resilience, resistance. I think it's the hardest thing I've done professionally, actually, was write this book. It was so hard to find the headspace, but also it was almost as if I couldn't not write it, because everything I was experiencing was so painful and so difficult and so infuriating that I felt a real need to express it and kind of give voice to it. So I guess my writing is something that keeps me sane. Voice notes keep me sane, slightly sane. I have one friend in particular who voice notes me all day, every day, and I voice note her all day, every day, and I just pour my head out to her because often I can't be with other adults. It's really isolating, so I just pour my head into my phone. I think lots of other single parents will resonate with that, with the need to do
100%. A voice note is...
What did we do before voice notes?
Well, I have no idea, but I do not speak to anyone on the phone anymore. It's
wild, isn't it?
Communicate by voice notes mainly.
So I love that. And when I lived in Northumberland, we would swim in the sea a lot, and I would be wild a lot. I would climb big hills, or I would run along the beach, or I would jump into a rock pool. And I recently moved to a city, and I need to find ways to be wild in the city, but certainly being outside, running, when I can escape. In lockdown, and when the children have been too poorly for me to leave them, I've just run in circles around my house again and again and again and again, relentlessly. It was kind of meditative and also a form of madness, I think. So I kept myself a bit sane that way. Yeah, reading. But also, I think I've tried to, like, the kids and I call ourselves a tribe, and, we're messy and it's chaotic sometimes, and it's difficult a lot of the time, but it's mostly joyful, and we're quite fierce, the 5 of us together. And for all it's been incredibly painful and sad and hard and worrying a lot of the time, I'm proud of everything that we've done together. And I like, the book's called Unschooled, the story of a family that doesn't fit in. And I've spent a lot of my time as a single parent defending my family unit to the children as well, and saying, because they might come home from school or read a book where there's a mum and there's a dad, or there isn't a disabled child in the family, or lots of different things that we don't have, that aren't part of our family, and that makes them sad. And so I've worked really hard in the time since I've been parenting on my own to let them know that our family is, an excellent family, and all families look different. And I didn't realize how hard that would be, that, not seeing ourselves out there, not seeing ourselves in any books or in any films or on the street a lot of the time. That's been quite hard. So I've fought for us.
Do you have any other connection with any other families who are in a similar situation, especially single parent families?
I don't know very many single parent families. I don't know many people like me. I don't know many single parent families with 4 children. And I don't know many single parent families with 4 children whose children can't attend school. But I do know lots of other families. There are tens of thousands of families like mine whose kids cannot access school and whose, they've been forced to give up work or make their lives smaller in order to meet their children's needs when the school system has failed them. And lots of those people are online by necessity because they can't leave their house, because maybe their children's complex needs means that social situations are really difficult for them. So I attend a parent carer group online, which is a lifesaver. And I know lots of other single parents too, but I find it difficult because their lives are so different to mine. So, for example, at the moment, lots of people are saying, isn't it so hard to juggle everything in the summer holidays? And actually, I find the summer holidays a bit easier because I don't feel so much pressure to be educating the 2 children who have to learn at home. I can kind of let things go a bit. And when people say, I didn't know there was an inset today, that was so frustrating. I'll be like, every day is an inset day for me. My children are here all the time. So sometimes I don't like myself that much because I can be a bit resentful of other families, of the respite that they get and the support they get from schools. So it's important to me to connect with other families whose kids can't access school, because it is a very specific problem and does present very specific challenges, in terms of having space to work and to breathe and to do stuff for yourself.
Yeah, and I think you please I'm speaking on behalf of everyone listening to this episode, please give yourself some compassion and a break. It's completely natural to feel resentful in a situation where other people get an easier street or couldn't possibly kind of comprehend the challenges and struggles. And
for sure. And it's also really completely fine as well if your child does go to school and you find the holidays really difficult, especially as a single parent as well, because it's really hardcore, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
It's just recognizing that there are different specific challenges if your child can't access school, not just the actual having your child at home, but also the fighting for what your child deserves, which is what I explore in Unschooled. It took me almost 4 years for my local authority to recognize what Emmy needed. And I get very frustrated that the education secretary talks about 1 day of school missed having an impact on a child's success later in life. And I think, well, 1 day my child has missed almost 4 years and no one is supporting her. So there's so much work to be done in terms of educating politicians about what the reality is for so many families with neurodivergent children.
Completely. And saying that 1 day of school missed, actually sometimes it makes complete sense to take a 1 day mental health day, even for a child. So
I think the expectation that we have for children to be at school for 5 days a week, for however 39 weeks a year, whatever it is a wild kind of sweeping gesture, really, because our children start school so young as well. In England, certainly they're 4. And we expect kids to be school ready. And by school ready, we mean they should be sitting on a chair. I mean, how many 4-year-olds do you know that can sit on a chair? And why should they be sitting on a chair? We take such a broad look at children. We say, what age are they? This is what level they should be at. And all kids are different. I don't know if I kept it in the final version of the book, but like, for example, my 4 kids with their reading, like 2 of them started reading when they were 3. Another one started reading when she was 5 or 6, and another one was 7 or 8. And now the one who's 7 or 8 is writing her own book at the age of 13. And, there was nothing wrong with her. She just wasn't ready to access it when she was 4. So we just need to take a much more flexible approach to how we think about learning, and also what we think success looks like.
Absolutely. And it kind of, it's what you said, earlier on in the conversation about what success looks like in your family, and seeing, I mean, I want my son to, of course, get have the opportunity to have a great education and be equipped to thrive in that way. But really, what's a huge priority to me is that he, feels, that he feels accepted for who he is, supported as an individual, that he is able to kind of lean into his passions, is able to build good relationships, is able to have, emotional intelligence, be able to kind of read the room in social situations. All it is just, there are so many things that are not taught in school that are just such important life skills and help us all feel, emotionally equipped to deal with whatever life is going to throw at us. So yeah, and I guess if you had a magic wand, and if you were given a magic wand and said, okay, Caro, here's your opportunity to transform the school system, what would you do?
I would want the expectation not be for all children to be in school every day. I think that that's an archaic view of what education should look like, kind of harking back to Victorian times or something. I think it would be really nice if learning was more skills based than knowledge based. One of the things two of my kids have found particularly difficult is the transition between lessons and the inability to just get lost inside something that they're very passionate about. And so I write a bit about project-based learning in Unschooled, and how there was more of that when I was at primary school. And when I was a primary school teacher as well, I used to love teaching projects and just allowing children to follow their curiosity a little bit more, giving children more space to learn. That would be wonderful, because we're also entering a really interesting time in society where technology is taking on a much bigger role. And so the skills that we need and the knowledge that humans need is changing. And I don't think that schools are probably adapting fast enough for that. For kids like mine who have been broken inside the school system, perhaps that would not have happened had there been more flexibility early on, and they might have been able to attend school part-time, even just going 1 or 2 days a week. That might have helped them to access it still for a bit longer, rather than being forced into it. So a more flexible approach in terms of how much time kids spend in school would be good. And then I guess as well, and this is particularly for single parent families, but for all families, really important that more support is put in place for parents and carers, so that if their child is not in school, the workplace is able to accommodate that, so that people are able to stay in jobs, which is so important, not just economically, but also, in terms of people's mental health and sense of who they are, their identity. So I feel kind of gloomy about what has happened in terms of my children, but I feel like if politicians would listen, we could tweak what we have now and make life so much easier without completely overhauling the system. I just think we need, I guess my book is a plea for people to listen, and to be a little bit more clever about how they listen. Sometimes the people who are shouting the loudest are not the people who have the most interesting things to say. And so I'm asking for politicians to listen to people like my children, who can't raise her voice actually, but has so much to say and has so much to share in terms of how she learns and how other children could learn. Yeah, so I guess I'm asking for a bit more of a conversation and a bit more flexibility.
How can we, as in everyone who's listening to this episode, support you and get behind this?
That's a nice question. Thanks. Well, Unschooled is out on September the 2nd. So I'm not quite sure when this will be broadcast, but if it's before September the 2nd, then you can pre-order Unschooled anywhere that sells books. And pre-orders are really important to authors because they indicate to shops and to the press the stories that are worth talking about and the issues that are important. And it's coming out in September, especially because that's when kids are going back to school, and hopefully it will resonate with people at that time. And if it's already out in the shops, then you can buy my book, and that would be an incredible endorsement of the work I'm doing and of the story that I'm trying to tell and of the issue that I'm highlighting. I talk a lot about this on Instagram, Caro Giles Writes, and on Substack as well. I do lots of chatting to the camera and highlighting things to do with this and other things to do with being a single parent and to do with being a woman on her own. Lots of stuff about female identity too, for anybody who's interested in that. And I have a column in Psychology's magazine as well, which is all about a life on the edge, being a single mum with lots of children trailing after her. So there's lots of ways you can find me.
I mean, I definitely feel like, I am talking to an absolute inspirational powerhouse here.
Yeah.
So you're amazing. You really are. And, it's, very, very inspiring, kind of what you're putting your time and your energy to. What an amazing mom you are and woman you are. And for anyone listening to this episode who is really struggling in a situation, they identify everything that we're talking about and feel really lost and like they don't know how to support their kids, or that their kids are not being supported by the school system, and they don't know where to turn next. Do you have any guidance for those people?
Yeah, I mean, read my book and you'll know you're not alone. But also there are some really wonderful people on social media who talk about this. Eliza Fricker's really good. Maybe I can put some resources in the podcast
100%
for people, if that would be helpful. That's probably the best thing to do. There's lots of stuff on my Instagram about it, but if we put some stuff in the notes, then maybe that'll be helpful for anybody in the same situation. Also, just contact me as well. I'm always happy to be in touch with readers and people in the same situation as me, because I know how lonely it can be.
Caro, thank you so much for this conversation, for your courage, your openness, your honesty, and everything that you're doing. As I said, super inspirational, and here to get behind you in any way we can. And I know that you are about to take your kids swimming, so we will add everything to the show notes, and go and order Caro's book. Thank you so much for such an interesting and open and honest conversation.
Thanks so much for giving me the time to talk, Zoe. It's really nice to meet you.
Thanks, Caro, and thank you everyone for listening. See you next time. And that's a wrap for this week. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If you did, then I have one small favour to ask. Please can you take a minute to subscribe to the Frollo podcast and give us a rating and review. This really helps other single parents who might benefit from it find us. The Frollo app, which is fully user verified for user safety, is available on the Google Play Store and the App Store, and you can find out more info and download links at www.frollo.com or follow us on Instagram at Frollo app. And you can purchase your copy of our book, How to Be a Happy Single Parent, at all the major book retailers. Until next time, have a great week.